Hi everyone, welcome to the Western Toad Monitoring and Aquatic Habitat Survey Community Science Training with Hogle Zoo, Sageland, and the DNR. This is our team. I'm Kaylani Fang. I am Utah Hogle Zoo's Field Conservation Programs Coordinator. You will also hear from Mary Pendergast, an ecologist at Sageland Collaborative, and Sierra Hastings, Sageland Collaborative's Communications and Development Specialist. This is our team, and these are the people that you might interact with throughout the summer season. So I'm going to start off by talking a little bit about Utah's Hogle Zoo. We focus on animal well-being, education. We are a place of recreation, and conservation is central to our mission. To do that, we use science, collaboration, and outreach to maximize our conservation impact in Utah. Some specific ways that we do that currently are advancing the recovery of imperiled species and habitats, such as the Western toad. We want to engage communities like yourselves and partners like Sageland. And we want to monitor and evaluate those programs and partnerships to make sure they're being as efficient and maximizing our impact. And through all of that, we want to use best practices to foster environmental sustainability and climate resilience. So up next, Mary's going to take over and talk a little bit about project background and our partners.
Thanks for that intro, Kaylani. I just want to make sure that we mention our crucial partners at the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources, and in particular, Alyssa Hoekstra, who is the state herpetologist and is tasked with management of 68 herpetofauna species in Utah. That's all the reptiles and amphibians. And roughly 30% of those are considered species of greatest conservation need in our state wildlife action plan. And so we also work really closely with native aquatics biologist Caitlin Purrington, who is going to be pursuing her master's as well as continuing to work with the state. And she's going to be completing some summary statistics on boreal toads, western toads, and their associated habitats in particular. So we really couldn't do it without our partners. And on the next slide, talking more about Division of Natural Resources or Department of Natural Resources, they are responsible for administrating state funding from a species protection account. And that is where we get some funding to support this project. The Division of Wildlife Resources are also responsible for executing the state's wildlife action plan, which includes the western toad as a species of greatest conservation need. And that's really an effort to keep all the wildlife species, particularly those ones that we see experiencing population declines, off the endangered species list, and make sure that we're doing those habitat restorations and different conservation actions for those species so they don't need to have that additional protection as being endangered or threatened. And those regional state wildlife biologists are doing their best to monitor lots of different wildlife populations all over the state. So coordination with nonprofit partners like Utah Hogle Zoo and Sageland Collaborative is really crucial for the Division of Wildlife Resources to help them with their priority actions for data collection and species recovery. So projects like these that involve the community, where volunteers are helping contribute to the state's understanding of toads and their habitats, really results in better understanding, but also more informed management decisions. And for those of you who have been following this project over the years, you may be more familiar with the common name boreal toad as opposed to western toad. Common names can be kind of confusing and they're used a little differently, but depending on where you are regionally. But for the purposes of this project, we've gone ahead and switched to using western toad as the common name because it's a little more of a general term and it includes all of the species and subspecies of Anaxyrus boreas that are found in Utah. So there's different subspecies that have slightly different common names, but all boreal toads are western toads, but not all western toads are boreal toads. So we're going to go more general and use the term western toad moving forward. So we're still serving for the same toad populations we always have been in Utah. Okay, and just a little bit about Sageland Collaborative. I'm honored to be on their team working as an ecologist. We are always working to support wildlife and habitat conservation, and often the mechanism to do that involves answering some basic ecological questions about where important habitats are located and how native species are using those habitats. So to answer those questions in a meaningful way that can support things like development of tools and strategies that our partners at the state and federal wildlife agencies need, we often end up collecting lots of data in the field. And to do this, we need to be sure we're using robust scientific protocols and consistent methods that result in statistically useful data, which is why we often have crucial academic partnerships as well as those agency partnerships. And last but not least, it's often vitally important that we engage community scientists like you to enable us to gather data across a larger geographic area and collect those data sets in a timely manner so that wildlife and habitat managers have that information they need to make those more informed decisions. So when these protocols can be transferred to something that the public can be trained to use, it's a really wonderful way of engaging all sectors in wildlife and land conservation. And at Sageland, in advance of all of our trainings, we like to acknowledge that we are here in Utah, where we're living, working, and recreating on the ancestral and traditional lands of the Ute, Goshute, Paiute, and Shoshone. And on our next slide, we also just want to mention that through each of our community science and restoration projects, we are always striving to build more resilient habitats, as well as stronger communities by creating opportunities for everyone to get involved in wildlife and land conservation. And to that end, on the next slide, we have a start of season survey. So please help us be more inclusive and learn more about your interest in this project and other projects and how we can increase community participation in efforts like these to provide more science in support of wildlife and land conservation. So if you want to grab that QR code, we really appreciate that feedback. It just helps us improve these projects. Okay, and then we have just a quick overview here. We're going to describe a little bit more background in community science and then move through more specifics on amphibians and western toads, and then finally how you can get involved. So really quickly, what is community science, and specifically, how does this project use community science? So long-term monitoring projects are often time and resource intensive. They're sensitive to changes in funding and other resources and personnel. So creating a community of scientists really creates a pool of data collectors that are already trained up. They're ready to pull information in a cost-effective and sustainable way. And projects like this also really increase the community's understanding of the work that the state and federal wildlife managers do, as well as raise awareness about native species and the importance of supporting amphibians and other species more broadly, often as indicators for how the ecosystem is functioning. And on the next slide, we have a couple quick examples here of some well-known community science projects. And really anything that involves scientists, but also the public in collecting consistent usable data could be considered a community science project. So one classic example is the Audubon Society's Christmas bird count. I think it was established in 1900. And the bird count is arguably the oldest formal community science project where volunteers across the Western Hemisphere go birding within a 15-mile diameter circle to record and count every bird they see and hear in a 24-hour period. And these data have been helping scientists identify conservation needs and track the impact of climate change and other environmental factors for over 125 years. Another example that's been going on for a long time is the U.S. Geologic Survey's Did You Feel It? And this is a system and method that the Geologic Survey has been using for a long time to gather information from the public about their experiences during earthquakes. So this citizen science or community science initiative allows the Geologic Survey to create maps of earthquake shaking intensity and assess damage by collecting reports from people who felt the earthquake faster than they could do without the support of the public on that. Okay. And the Western Toad Project, previously known as the Boreal Toad Project, was established in 2014 and has been going strong ever since. We've had some really interesting milestones, the addition of the community and government partners every year, the collaboration on developing a universal field form for collecting the data across the strait. We pivoted as needed to virtual trainings with the pandemic. And we've been working with the community year after year to gather the information needed to understand where toads are using habitats for breeding and the condition of those habitats and how they might be changing so that we can have more informed habitat restoration and management decisions. And speaking of the conservation value of understanding where species are located and what the condition of their habitats are, if you're interested in helping with other amphibian and reptile species or herpetofauna, please use this QR code as well to join our sister project called the Utah Herp Search. You can find all the materials you need at that QR code to sign up to participate in more efforts like these.
Okay, so up next, now that we've covered a bit of the background of the project and how the community can get involved in this data collection, we're going to dive a little bit more into all about amphibians and Western toads specifically. So we're going to talk about what is an amphibian, amphibians in crisis, why we should care, and then we'll dive into the nitty-gritty of Western toads specifically. So starting off with what is an amphibian. Amphibian means dual life, and that is because they spend part of their life cycle in water and part of their life cycle on the land, and they complete this life cycle, and then it repeats, as you can see in this diagram. And it means dual life, indicating that both aquatic and terrestrial habitat need. And during the aquatic phase of their life cycle, they have gills, which allows them to breathe and live in water. They are the oldest living vertebrate class. They evolved about 350 million years ago, and they are cold-blooded, or also known as ectotherms. That means they depend on the external environment to regulate their body temperatures. There are 3 orders of amphibians. There is Caudata, which are newts and salamanders, Caecilians, which are these really interesting limbless snake-like creatures, and then we have Anura, which are frogs and toads. And you can see that Anura have legs here, or sorry, no tail here, whereas these guys have tails. So unfortunately, amphibians are in crisis. 40% of amphibians are threatened with extinction globally. You can see from this chart from the IUCN Amphibian Conservation Action Plan, published just last year. The yellow to red areas here indicate species or proportion of species that are vulnerable to critically endangered. Amphibians are over here on the left side. You can see that they have the greatest proportion of threatened species compared to other classes of vertebrates. In the gray area here, that indicates species that are data deficient. So we just don't know enough about these species to be able to say what their status is. And that is why we have a need for continued data collection that'll help us understand more about these species and be able to manage them better. So why is this happening? Through habitat destruction and fragmentation, these amphibians are in decline worldwide. I have a little example here where we have a pond where these amphibians will go to breed. And then once they finish that part of their life cycle, they may move to their upland territories. But if we have things such as roads or agricultural land or things like that that interfere with their natural life cycle, it can really cause drastic declines. Additionally, introduced species can outcompete or predate on the native amphibians that are there. The pet trade and consumption are big problems globally. And then climate change, shifts in average temperatures, extreme weather events, drought, flooding, etc., are all contributing to rapid changes within their environments that they may not be prepared for. In addition to that, pollution is really drastically affects amphibians. They have really sensitive, porous skin. So when a pollutant enters a stream system or a terrestrial system, amphibians are probably going to be one of the first to feel that. One of the biggest threats to amphibians we see globally is chytrid fungus. It is an invasive fungus that lives in water and attacks amphibian skin. It thickens their porous skin, preventing them from regulating their bodies properly. And this has caused mass mortalities globally. So why should we care? Amphibians are cultural symbols. Some believe that they bring fortune and healing, or symbols of transformation based off their unique life cycles. And they make for excellent storybook characters, as you can see here. I'm sure many of us remember the frog and toad stories. These are great ways to help people connect to the nature around them by seeing it in a cartoon form. And sorry, they've also been used in human medical research as well. A significant example of that is African clawed frogs were used for early pregnancy tests. Additionally, glass frogs are being used in current research right now to understand red blood cell kind of congregation within their livers and how that can be applied to human medicine. Tadpoles are super important for water quality. They eat all the algae in wetlands during hot summer months and keep those waterways clear so they don't get super backed up. Amphibians are super important for the food chain. Since they inhabit both terrestrial and aquatic systems, they occupy kind of a middle trophic role there where they eat the bugs and things that are below them in the food chain, but then they're also food for things such as fish and birds. Because of this, toads, because of their porous skin and their role in the food chain, toads or amphibians in general, are really great environmental indicators. So if there's a change in the environment that then causes a drastic decline in their populations, we can take note of that and say that, okay, there's something going on in this environment here that we might need to intervene to help them out. So as we move on to the star of the show, we're going to talk a little bit more about western toads specifically. They inhabit the west coast of North America, as you can see on this map, and they go up a little bit into Canada as well. They're a high elevation species found at greater than 7,000 feet, depending on where you are. And like I mentioned before, western toads are highly terrestrial. So a lot of times when we think about frogs, we think about them just in ponds and things, but these toads are actually very highly terrestrial. So you're going to find them in high elevation alpine wetlands. A couple fun facts about western toads. They eat insects and worms, and they are a migratory species, and they've been tracked moving up to 3 miles between breeding sites here in Utah. So they brumate, which is kind of a word used for herpetofauna instead of hibernation. So they can brumate for up to 6 months per year. And that means they need a variety of habitats. So in the summer months, when they move to their breeding ponds, they're going to need those really wet, permanent water bodies. So ponds, streams, things like that. And then as spring rolls around, it starts to get colder. They'll move into mountain shrub and aspen conifer forests. And they'll hide in little burrows below the frost line until it starts to warm up again. And they'll move back down to their breeding ponds. And a really fun thing is that their toxins smell like a really earthy peanut butter. So, as Mary mentioned earlier, western toads are a species of greatest conservation need, and they occupy several very isolated metapopulations across the state. And so that is why they are a species of concern for us, and their populations are in decline due to chytrid, habitat loss and degradation, and variable climate and extreme weather patterns. So up next, we're going to talk about what is being done. Here at Hogle Zoo, we have an assurance colony. We opened a new exhibit in 2024 known as Wild Utah. And within Wild Utah, we have a dedicated amphibian conservation center where we house our assurance colony. We collected eggs from the wild from a population that was facing severe declines, brought them back to captivity, raised them up to adults, and each year since, we have worked with our partners to manage their genetics, breed and release young tadpoles and young toads back into the wild on the Ponce Plateau. And Hogle Zoo and Omaha Zoo toads have been recaptured after 1 year, which is great because that means they're surviving the winter. And yeah, you can come see these toads at the zoo. We are also an educational and outreach organization, so we have dedicated education staff that brings toads to second grade classrooms across the state to educate young kids about amphibians, toads, the habitats they inhabit, and why they should care about the nature around them. We work with traditional media, and Sageland Collaborative has done a great job of spreading the message of toads across the state. We do presentations. We have dedicated signage in Wild Utah. And a lot of times we're on surveys where people will see us walking around in wetlands with gloves and clipboards and wonder what we're doing. And we'll always take the opportunity to stop and chat with whoever's interested. So through this project and with your help, we are aiming to fill data gaps, as Mary also mentioned earlier. These data are used to inform maps such as this, where we can determine suitable habitat. We can understand where their declines are happening and where these toads are present. And then we've been involved in some habitat work through stream restoration, fencing, and planting. Specifically, this is at the toad release site where we release our captive bred toads back onto the landscape on the Ponce Plateau. So we built these BDAs to create these natural, nice floodplains that these toads like to lay their eggs in the early summer. So now we're going to talk about identifying the western toad. So we're going to start with eggs and tadpoles and move through all their different life stages. Toad eggs are laid in long gelatinous strings. This is contrary to frogs that will lay them in clumps. So you might see these really nice, beautiful strands where you can see each individual egg, or you might see they kind of look like gooey worms when they get covered with substrate at the bottom of a pond. So they can be really hard to see, and they might go unnoticed if you're not paying attention, but this is kind of what you want to keep your eye out if you're out surveying for toads in the early summer. Their tadpoles are black and teardrop in shape, and their eyes are inset on the top of their head, which we're going to talk about more in a little bit later, but this is what they're going to kind of look like. So once they move past the tadpole phase, they'll start to grow legs. As you can see here, this guy's got little legs, but he still has a tail. So they're starting to look more toad-shaped. They're growing legs, but they still have a little bit of that tadpole tail, and that's what we call a metamorph. Then they'll move into the juvenile or toadlet phase. This is when they fully look like a normal toad, but they are just teeny tiny. They're going to be about the size of your thumbnail at this stage. And when we see them at this stage, we usually see them in large numbers. This is because they just emerged from where they were as tadpoles, and they haven't had time yet to disperse into upland areas. So adults are they can be about the size of your palm. They are green to brown, and they have these warts across their back, you can see here. Most identifiable about western toads when you're in high elevation areas is that they have this creamy dorsal stripe that runs down their back. Their bellies have these inky spots. And adults we classify as being greater than or equal to 50 millimeters. And then boreal toads in Utah don't have the normal vocal sacs that we expect from a lot of amphibian species. So they don't have that normal calling sound that you might expect from a normal frog. But the males do have a release call that sounds a little bit like this. And they will only make that sound when picked up, or maybe during breeding season if you're really close to them. So other high elevation amphibians that you might see when surveying for toads are chorus frogs. They look like this. They have this really unique dark stripe that runs from the tip of their nose down their side. And they're pretty small. They're about the size of your thumb as well. So they're much different than western toads, but you have a good chance of seeing them used in Utah wetlands. The other thing you might see is a tiger salamander. They are only native species of salamander in the state, and go over kind of what to look for next. Okay, so now we're going to compare their larvae. This is probably the most difficult part of identification when trying to tell the difference between these species at different life stages. So western toads, like we talked about, they are usually solid black, teardrop shaped, and their eyes are inset on the top of their head. So when you're looking straight down at them, they're going to look completely smooth on all sides. Whereas with the chorus frog, they're going to be kind of a dark mottled color, a little lighter, a little more oval shaped, and their eyes are on the sides of their heads. So when you're looking straight down, you're going to see these little bumps on either side of their head. Tiger salamander larvae are really different from either of these because they have these feathery gills on their sides, and their bodies are a little bit longer than frogs or toad tadpoles. Okay, so now that we've covered western toads, why they're in decline, and what to look for, we're going to talk about how to get involved. So there's two ways to participate. You can join one of our biologists on a guided survey, or you can conduct your own independent survey. We'll talk about each of these coming up. So for guided field trips, there are set dates and locations that are predetermined, and they are led by a Hogle Zoo biologist. So if you're a little overwhelmed with information, these are a really great option to go out with an expert, learn the ropes, and then build confidence so you can go out and do it on your own as well. These surveys happen late May to August, and they can be single-day trips where you meet us out in the field, survey for a day, and head home, or you can join us on multi-day camping trips where we'll visit multiple sites over multiple days. And you can expect car camping conditions when you join on one of these camping trips. So here's a few photos of what it kind of looks like. You'll join us out in the field. We will spend some time hiking to the site. We'll arrive, conduct our survey, collect data on the toads and the habitat that they're in. We'll weigh them, measure them, things like that, if we find any. And then here's just a nice photo of us camping in a beautiful place at the end of the day. You can also conduct independent surveys. You can go anytime that you want throughout the summer. You can pick any area you want. Maybe you're hiking to your favorite hike that goes to an alpine lake that you like to do every summer. You can go ahead and fill out a data form while you're there. Or you can choose from a list of sites that were recommended by the DWR. This is based on their priorities, places that they would love to get more eyes on, more data on, but they may not necessarily get there throughout the summer or be able to collect consistent data at those sites. If it is one of these places that you go to every summer, maybe consider going 2 or 3 times and seeing how the habitat changes from May to August, and that would be really interesting data for us to know as well. And if you do want to conduct an independent survey, you can pick up a toad backpack. Within the toad backpacks, there's everything you need to complete a full survey. There's disinfectant, water quality meters, GPSs, measuring tools, nets, gloves, everything. And you can pick these up from Sageland Collaborative's office downtown or the Hogle Zoo front gate. These are free to check out. You can check them out for a couple weeks at a time. So if that sounds like a lot of fun to you and really interesting, I'm going to talk about how you can sign up. So for guided trips, this is a little step-by-step guide. You can scan this QR code and it will take you to our sign-up page, which I'm going to go through a little bit more in detail. Once you fill that out, you'll be instructed to fill out an application form. It's not really an application, that's just what we have to call the form. It's really just to get more information about you and so that we can prepare for a fun time in the field. And then all you have to do is show up and survey with us. So when you scan that QR code, it's going to take you to this Eventbrite page. This is what the collection will look like. And then if you scroll down on that page, it's going to show you all the different trips you can go on. And these are kind of organized by whether it's a day trip, the location, and if you drive your own car or if you carpool with the zoo. So you can scroll through, look at all of these, see what dates work for you, what sounds fun, and what will work for you. When you click on an event specifically, this is our first trip of the season coming up May 29th. It will be a day trip at where we're going to do a bio blitz at Strawberry Reservoir. So we're going to see everything that's there, whether it's toads, frogs, anything. And we'll meet at the Strawberry Reservoir Visitor Center. So that's what the self-drive is. But yeah, this is what the event page is going to look like. And you want to make sure you sign up at least 1 week before the trip date because the registrations will close after that. So then once you click on the event, it's going to give you a little more information about what to expect. It's going to tell you all about transportation, where we're meeting and what time, the difficulty of that survey. Some of our surveys have really big hikes, others have no hikes at all. So we have a little bit of a rating and scale system here that you can check out and see what works for you. I let you know what to bring or where. We ask you to bring a packed lunch, snacks, water, things like that for these day trips. I have a link to check the weather, which is super important because there's often afternoon rainstorms in the mountains and you don't want to be caught in the rainstorm without a rain jacket or something like that. So always make sure you check before you join us. If you need to refer back to these training videos, there's also a link to that here. And then this is the link to the application form that we're going to also ask you to fill out. So if you sign up for a camping trip, I'll also provide an agenda for you. That'll break down each day. And this is subject to change because things always change in the field. You never know what's going to happen. But this is going to be like a rough plan that you can expect. For camping trips, I also give you a quick packing list. And then all meals and snacks will be provided by the zoo, bathroom supplies. And if you have never been camping before, maybe you don't have camping supplies, or you're missing 1 or 2 things, we may have extra we can help you out with so you can still join us. So when you fill out that application form, is required 1 week before the trip start date. It's easiest if you just sign up, fill it out at the same time so you don't forget. And really what we're asking there is just for emergency contacts. If you have any allergies or medical concerns that we should know about, because we're going to be working in sometimes pretty remote areas. Yeah. So signups for these trips are open. August trips are going to open May 1st. And if the trip you really want to go on is already full, there is a waitlist option. So it will notify you if you join that waitlist and somebody else drops off, you'll be added in. That being said, if you know that you can't come on a trip that you've already signed up for, please cancel your registration as soon as you know so that other people can come. And then you only need to fill out that volunteer application once per season unless something changes in between. So for independent sites, you need to complete the training, which you're doing, which is great. Pick a site, either one that you are hiking to for fun or one that is recommended by the DWR. Download the Survey 123 app. Pick up a towed backpack if you can or if you want to. Complete your survey and then submit your data. And we're really looking for any data that you can collect. Even if you don't see a toad, having habitat data is really important for us to know as well. So if you're interested in going to a site that the DWR is interested in and has recommended for surveys, you can scan this QR code. If you do it with your phone, the map will pull up, and then if you scroll into each of the pins, it's going to give you more information about that site, give you the location, and I've indicated survey boundaries here to help guide kind of where to target your efforts. And to stay updated with the project, you can sign up to receive the project newsletters. This is where you'll find training resources, trip updates, and we like to recognize our volunteers as well through those newsletters. So now that we've kind of covered how to sign up and maybe got your interest, we're going to talk about field protocols next. So we've been talking a lot about surveying and data and all of that. So we're going to talk about like, what is a survey? What do you look for, and how do you submit it? If you've engaged in this project in the past, you may remember the physical data form. And if you're comfortable using that, you can still submit those. But this year we're moving to virtual data submission through the Survey 123 app. So to submit through Survey 123, you download the app. You can just search ArcGIS Survey 123, and the logo looks like this. Once you download it, you'll get a page that looks like this, and you can continue without signing in. You do not need to make an account. And then within the app, there's a search bar, and there'll be a QR code scanning tool, and you can use that to scan this code, and it'll pull up the survey form for you. So when you're completing a survey, you're probably going to drive or hike to your site. Once you arrive, it'll look something like this. Obviously, every pond, stream, wetland is different, but we'll say this is our example for right now. So you'll show up, this is what it will look like. And then you want to make sure that you disinfect your gear before you step into the water. We want to do this to prevent the spread of chytrid. So if you are hiking to get to your site and walk through a stream before you get to the main pond that you want to survey, we don't want to spread chytrid from, if it is present in that stream, to the pond. So we want to make sure we disinfect our boots and any gear that touches any water body. So if you check out a towed backpack, it will come with a full spray bottle of a disinfectant. You can spray the sides and bottoms of your boots. We use quaternary ammonia, also known as quat. You can get this from most hardware stores, and you just mix a solution. You can also use a 10% solution of bleach. And if you are only going to do one hike and then not hike again for several days, and it's midsummer, so it's really hot, you can leave your boots out in the sun and make sure that they are fully dry before you take them out again. And if you hike through kind of like really muddy soil and it gets clumped on your boots, you might want to consider bringing like a scrub brush to get that off, because the chytrid can live within the mud. We don't want to spread that between water bodies. Additionally, we want to make sure that we're wearing gloves every time or anytime we handle amphibians. It's not that the amphibians can hurt us in any way, or the toads can hurt us in any way, but we have sunscreen, lotions, and oils on our skin that we don't want to get onto them, because they have that really sensitive skin. So we don't want to hurt them. And then you could potentially handle a toad that has chytrid fungus, and then if you find another toad, you don't want to spread it between animals. So you just want to make sure you're changing your gloves in between handling toads. So you're at your survey site and you want to begin your survey. If you're with a big group of people, you might spread out like this and survey. If you're with just a friend or yourself and you're at like a pond like this, you might survey around the pond. There's a few different methods that we're going to talk about as we go, but here's some photo examples of what a few survey techniques could look like. So if you are by yourself, you might start here at the start of your stream, and then you might meander from moving from the wet areas into drier areas, looking at shrubs and willows, tall grasses, and kind of weaving your way through the habitat as you go. Then you might encounter a separate water body. You might find a toad there. And then you'll collect your data, keep moving. And that is kind of the general survey protocol if you're surveying by yourself. If you're going with a friend, you might consider splitting up, each covering a side of the stream, doing the same kind of method, meandering your way through. Then you might get to the other side and decide to switch sides, see if another person sees something you didn't. A lot of times when you're surveying, toads will sense danger coming and they'll hunker down and be really still. And they're super camouflaged, so you might not see them. But then once the initial presence of danger passes, then they might start moving again. And that's when the second person or the second go around might see them. So it's always worth double checking. And if you have the time, doing double checking each other's sides there. If you're with a big group, you might divide the site into sections and each cover a section like this. And then you heard me mention using the Survey 123 app earlier. So I'm kind of going to go through how the survey will work and then how you fill out the survey form as you go. So you'll arrive at your site, and this is when you're going to want to pull out your app and start filling out your survey details. So this is what Survey 123 is going to look like. Looks a little bit different on my computer versus your phone, but it's essentially the same. I'm going to continue without signing in. I'm going to open the survey. Normally you'd want to update. For demonstration purposes, I'm going to continue without updating. For now, I'm going to go to collect. And then this is what it's going to look like. So for survey details, this is kind of the start of survey things. Before you really have even looked around, it's going to autofill the date, double check, make sure that's correct. You can go in and edit that if needed, but it is correct. Then you're going to fill out your site name. You want to use like the most commonly used name for that site, or if it's kind of an area that's not well known, you can describe where you're at in as much detail as you can so we know where you are. So I'm going to say that we're surveying at Lake Mary up at Brighton. Then if I know what it is, I'm going to enter the elevation. If you check out a toad backpack, there will be a GPS where you can find the elevation using it. So you want to enter that there. And then you're going to want to enter your name and anybody's name who's surveying with you. So I'm going to put my name first and last. And then if I'm surveying with Mary, I'm going to press that plus button to say there's another person. And I'll enter her name as well. And let's say, oh, oops, I didn't mean to add another person. I can always delete that. And it's totally good. Start coordinates are going to be really important so we know exactly where the survey took place, exactly where this data is coming from. If you have the ability to do that on your smartphone, that is super helpful. Or if you check out a backpack and use the GPS, it's going to be super helpful for us to know. Then you're going to enter the time that you start the survey when you arrive at your site. And then it's going to ask you the weather conditions. And these might change throughout your survey, so you might have to come back to this and change it if suddenly a thunderstorm comes in. But you're going to fill this out, go through the weather, what the wind is like. We're going to say it's mostly clear, calm. If you know the air temp, you can put it in. Oh, in degrees Celsius if you know. So, and then if you happen to know the rain, if it's rained in the last 72 hours, that's good information for us to know as well. So it's a none. So once you've completed this, then you're going to move on to the next phase of your survey. This is when you're going to start meandering through, looking into all the vegetation, peeking into the shallow area of the water. And you're going to start taking note of the habitat around you. And you're going to fill out the habitat information as you go throughout your survey, but you're going to fill it out for each water body you encounter. So let's look at what that looks like in the form. We're going to move to the next page with this arrow down here. And then you're going to open the individual water bodies tab. And so let's say we're surveying a pond. It's a permanent pond. The water's there year round. It doesn't dry up throughout the summer. We're going to indicate what depth it is in meters. And then we're going to indicate the substrate that we see. So is it more of a silt mud, sand, gravel, cobble, things like that. So we're going to fill it out. And this is what you're filling out as you move your way through the survey. Then we're going to describe the vegetation and the kind of, the composition of vegetation that's there. So when you're looking at your water body, it is sometimes helpful to kind of divide the water body into quarters or sections and say, you know what, hey, this whole quarter is covered with some sort of aquatic vegetation. So I'm going to say, you know, around 25% is vegetation that is growing out of the water. And then maybe also 25% is growing underneath the water. It's not popping out of the water. It's just staying kind of below the surface. And we'll say there's a lot of algae. And then if you are aware of chara, you can input that here. In the surveyor packet that comes in the backpacks, it describes what chara is, and you can learn a little bit more about it there. So we'll say there's no chara here. Then you're going to want to describe the vegetation along the shorelines, how abundant it is, what the shallows are like along the shorelines. Does it immediately get really deep, or does it kind of stay shallow the whole time? Describe the turbidity, if the water is cloudy or not. And then this water chemistry section, you can fill out if you check out a backpack and there is a water quality unit in there. But otherwise, if you don't have a backpack or a water quality meter, you won't need to worry about this section. In the surveyor packet, it will walk you through exactly how to fill out this section. So once you have gone through all of your water bodies, let's say at this site there was just one. If you have multiple water bodies, like in this section, there might be this big pond, but then you might have a little side wet meadow or smaller pond off to the side. Then you would, press this plus section here, and that's when you would fill out all that same information over again for the next water body encounter. So then once you finish your survey, sorry about that. So once you kind of work your way through the habitat data, you're working your way along, but then you encounter a toad. In this case, you're going to want to go to the next section where it says amphibian data, say amphibians were detected. And this is when you can fill out all of the information and data on toads. You're going to want to indicate where it is. This will, if you press this target sign here, it'll get your exact location. If you're out of service or not able to get GPS location, then you could manually move your map around if it's loading and target the area that you want it in. Or you can write in the notes kind of toad found in the first or second water body, whatever it may be. You can fill out the distance from water that you found the toad. So this will be the perpendicular distance to the closest water body. So if you found a toad here, then you would measure in a straight line to the water as best as you can. And if you check out a toad backpack, there is a measuring tape inside from the zoo. Indicate what water body it's in, the species you found, the life stage and number that was there, whether they're adults or juveniles, and things like that. And then you can indicate if any other herp species were detected. And as Mary mentioned earlier, you can submit photos of that to the Herp Search project. So you found your toad, submitted your data. You can continue to finish your habitat data. Once you fill out each individual water body, you're going to want to fill out a general form. So we're back on the habitat page, and you're going to want to fill out a this section, which kind of describes the site as a whole. So you described each water body. Now you want to describe the area as a whole. So the number of breeding water bodies. These are areas where you could imagine that a toad would lay an egg there, kind of slow moving, shallow water, gentle slopes, some vegetation for them to eat. Describe the turbidity and kind of exactly what you did in the other sections. So once you've kind of completed all of the habitat data, then you're on to the last step, the final survey details. So once you've moved through this, you're going to describe the site, if there's fish, if you had time to search the entire site, its origin, things like that. Rank the disturbances that you saw, and then the end time. And then if you're able to, filling out those end coordinates helps us identify exactly where you started and ended and the area in between that you surveyed. Once you finish, you can press the check button. Since I haven't filled everything out, it's not going to let me submit yet. But once you do finish, it'll ask you to submit it now or send it to the outbox. If you're in service, you can submit that as soon as you're ready. But if you're out of service, you may need to send it to your outbox, save it there, and then submit it once you're back in service. So after you finish your survey, you're going to want to disinfect again. It's required anytime you step into a distinct water body. So if you're hiking to your site, you want to disinfect before you step into the stream, disinfect after, and then before you survey, and then after again. So in between each step, between water bodies, you want to disinfect. And this is, again, just to make sure we're not spreading chytrid and contributing to amphibian declines. So I know that was a lot of information, and the survey form can be a little bit intimidating, but we really encourage you to come out on a guided survey, build up your confidence, learn from experts, and then you can go out and do this on your own. So thank you so much to volunteers and the Utah Species Protection Account for funding this important work, and we hope to see you out on a survey.